So I'm a cat feeder in one of the in the CBD area. Some people would term it as one of the notorious low-income, older generation HDB estates in Singapore. I have been doing cat feeding since 2015, and it was actually by chance because I was just walking past. I did work in the CBD area, so I just walked past and I noticed some cats that were not regularly fed. So that's how I came upon feeding, and it slowly became a regular schedule for after work because I noticed that there was no regular pattern, and then I bumped into some aunties or some older generation uncles that put food for them occasionally, that kind of scenario, or they did. And at that point of time, this was back in 2014-15, where perhaps education or advocacy was not as strong. So, education in the sense of probably the more common right way of feeding, like you put it on a plate, you clean them after you feed and things like that. That makes it more palatable for the entire community to accept, instead of just a bunch of things on the floor that makes the public that do not really appreciate the cats or the stray animals around, then they'll be more complaining about, why so dirty. There are challenges on two components. So one is the gender issue that perhaps a lot of cat feeders will face, because I don't have statistics for this, but most of the cat feeders probably are generally female gender. But the other one I would like to touch on is more about the society bias. So the first one about the female gender issue, I did face that in the beginning as well, but not as evident as probably some of the stories that I've heard from my fellow volunteers. So coming back to this, it's about, and most of the time when I get attacked or stories I've heard, it's always about a male dominant figure that comes after you, in that sense of they wag a finger at you and says no cat feeding is illegal or something along those lines. So from that perspective, I think it's sometimes there's a few elements to that. Whether it's a personal bias that they have, cats are dirty, you cannot feed because the government says cannot feed, which they have been misinformed about, of course, or it's just them having a bad day. All these elements come into play. So the first rule of thumb that if I encounter some situations like this is usually like education. So we'll tell them like, actually uncle, it's actually not illegal to feed, but we have to clear up and everything like that. So when I was younger, I was a bit more brash. I'm just sharing my life story in a sense. When I was younger, I was a bit more brash. I would actually raise my voice and try to counter that behavior, because if they're aggressive, you are aggressive back. But through the later on, when through my learning journey, I realized that the more antagonistic you are to that person, it might come back and harm the cats in the long term, because if the cats are used to human touch or whatever, they might be the ones that are in danger, because if you antagonize the human goes after the cat, because you are not there 24 hours a day to look after, to keep a watch out for the cat. So that's on the gender issue. Perhaps I can touch on the society bias. So the area where I feed, there is corporates or organizations or people that are working in those environments that have biasness towards stray cats. I call them stray cats, but the proper term is community cats, towards community cats. They've made some sarcastic comments or remarks previously. They'll say like, it's because of those stupid cat feeders, that's why the cats always come. So then we try to educate the administrative office where we say like, it's not because of the feeding, because all the cats are sterilized and controlled population, and we control them in a certain area so that they don't go away from their food source. So, and if really we want to find out the root of the problem, it has to come down to societal norms or societal social assistance where sterilization takes place. It's not about whether the cats are always here because they are cat feeders. Because when you go down to the root of the problem, perhaps it is to do with not stopping the breeding process from happening, so you've got to sterilize them, and then you can't cope, so you just throw them downstairs, in that sense. Many people, I think, would associate a Singapore cat feeder, or their impression of a cat feeder is an elderly lady, more elderly ladies than males, but still elderly, who feed discriminately, and they feed really late at night. There's a few reasons for that, but the feeding really late at night is because they want to avoid human prying eyes, so that's something that we all understand. However, in the time that I've started to volunteer and feed from 2015 onwards till now, so it's about 5-6 years, I have noticed a marked evolution of cat feeders and the cat feeder volunteers that we come across, as well as the professions they are in. So the group that I volunteer with, for example, we have, most of us are professionals, meaning we are late 20s, up to 30s, 40s, and even 50s, so professional career, and the diverse professions we all have ranges from people working in the legal department, in auditing, accounting, and you know, it goes into creative fields, it goes into childcare. So it's a very diverse, they have very diverse career paths. So whenever I ask them, like, oh, what do you do? You know, like sometimes we share, you know, we have little gatherings, we share. So, and then one of the questions I ask is like, what makes you want to do this? Or so they say, like, because I feel that it's something good that I want to do, and it's something right that I want to do, and I want to do something good for the cats who otherwise have nobody to look out for them and to feed them. I mean, and it comes at the commitment level where they want to help, but they don't know how to help. So the first step is to start feeding, in that sense. Yep. And the first step to change the public perception of cat feeders, I think it's happening. It's happening because there's a lot more of us around than the sparse few elderly feeders that we see at night. Okay, so that's one thing that's happening, but it takes time. The other thing that we do apart from feeding and just feeding, there's this secondary role that we play among all the cat feeders here. We actually do advocate and educate the strangers that we come across. And through our learning journey, and this has been shared with everyone else as well, through the learning journey, it's not about being antagonistic, it's about really advocating and nudging that positive behavior. So how do you do that? You know, it could be through convincing, it could be several ways, or maybe we have a workshop, you know, many things like that, but you don't have the chance of a workshop and gather everyone together at one point in time. So you try in your own little part just to educate one-on-one, for example, and people are more receptive when you do it a one-on-one rather than in a group anyway.